Today we kick off our Skillshare series with a presentation about the project I've been involved with, which is Plant Voices podcast from Tayport Community Garden. So it's a very small project from a very small community group. And it's really trying to give you an idea of what starting a community audio storytelling from scratch is like and how I did it. This is by no means a universal answer to everything. This is not as fancy as a podcast. You know, there's many different podcasts, and there's obviously many different ways of running a podcast. And I'm by no means a podcasting guru, but somebody had to throw themselves under the bus to to pave the way for others to do these Skillshares in the future. So I thought I'd start with my experience and, you know, in a way, trying to encourage people to have a go at audio storytelling, either as your own podcast or maybe as a contribution to our 1,000 Better Stories podcast, or maybe, you know, some other podcasts you have your eye on. Because it's not as scary as it might look to start with. So what is Plant? Plants is people learning about nature in Tayport, and we're part of Tayport Community Trust, and we're sort of quite an independent group that is responsible for running the local community garden. And we also do all sorts of other projects associated with the garden, which includes also digital storytelling and including blogging, video, and now the podcast as well as reaching out into the community and doing you know, encouraging people to in behavior change to cut their carbon footprints. And we've been working together since 2011. So it's been a while. Have a look at the website if you're interested in sort of exploring what we do. So the way I arrived in the project is after a career in molecular plant ecology and then e-learning and higher education, about 7 years ago, ended up actually turning to my own community in Tayport, where, you know, I lived in Tayport for 16 years now. But it's only 7 years ago, I realized there's a fantastic gem of a community here. And I got involved in developing the Plant Community Garden project from scratch, because we basically ended up applying for all the money, developing the ideas, and now we, you know, quite an established project. And my role has been primarily, because I had the experience in e-learning, so digital storytelling was quite a natural extension of that work. And also believed in the fact that, you know, everybody's got a mobile now. There's so many tools that are free available to people that really, what we really need to do is enable people in the community to tell their own stories. So I've always had that attitude that I wanted to upskill as many people, involve as many people in telling our stories as possible as a community. So that's why we have a community blog, and I've always trained up and encouraged people to tell their own stories as well. So that's my philosophy, that's my skills. I also run the Carbon Conversations program, which deals with more climate awareness and the behavior change aspects of our projects. But let's not talk about this today. So that's me in the garden working with the kids. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of my job, when we actually talk to the people and work with the people from the bottom up. So why podcasting? Well, as I said, I've been sort of exploring this digital storytelling space, running community blog, experimenting with videos and all sorts of different apps that allow you to put sort of digital multimedia stories together, and getting kids to do it, getting other people to do it with mobile technology. But, when I sort of asked myself, why did I branch out into podcasting? Well, the only honest answer is because I'm a podcast addict. And I think a lot of people probably came to that space because of that. And I will blame my 2-hour one-way commute, so it's really 4-hour commutes between Dundee and Edinburgh when I had my job in Edinburgh. And this was really one of the best ways to sort of explore ideas and stories and information in depth that would leave my hands free to do crochet when I was on the train. So that's it, crochet and commuting. Blame that for me moving into podcasting. But I have to say, I will also blame SCCAN because, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, Philip can correct me on this, SCCAN started moving into the podcasting space and using podcast storytelling as a way of inspiring people with stories of community action on climate change. You know, that really signaled to me that, you know, there's a bigger space out there that is probably worth exploring, and I will not be just alone doing my little podcast from the village in Fife. That there'll be somebody else there that I can, you know, maybe do it together with. Before I move from this slide, Radiolab. This is my holy grail of podcast storytelling. If you've not listened to this, it's absolutely amazing. And these are a couple of stories here, Dark Side of the Earth and CRISPR stories, which are just amazing. And then these guys have an amazing way of bringing things to life and quite dry subjects, lots of science behind it as well. And I thought, well, if I could do that, that would be amazing. But then I found out how much production is involved in this and how big the team is and how much budget is involved. So maybe sort of scaled back my ambition of what can be achieved in a community context, but I'm still looking to that as my primary inspiration out there. So, you know, how did I get to actually run a podcast? Well, as I said, actually, SCCAN's been very helpful. All these, they've been running workshops for a while to do with podcasting and storytelling, and that focus obviously on some basic technical skills, but also about storytelling for change. So the techniques in that, and how to find your story and how to get your audience to identify with a story as well. So that's been really useful, not just for technical reasons, but actually really it's been helpful to see that there's other people wanting to share their stories, and that there's a network, maybe growing potential of developing something like a Storyteller Collective. So this is a space definitely worth exploring, I thought. But, you know, unless you start doing stuff practically, it's really all theory. So really, I just threw myself into actually recording and doing the podcasts, and of course, learning from the stuff that's out there. So really dissecting the podcasts that are my favorite podcasts for how they approach the storytelling things on a budget. So how do I do it in terms of what equipment I use? Well, I started with my phone, either by using just a microphone, inbuilt microphone. There's some nice techniques that actually produce a really decent sound with the modern phones, because it's quite a nice directional microphone. But then I moved to slightly more upgraded equipment. We've had iPads as part of garden equipment for a while, because we've been focusing on storytelling for a while before we started podcasting. So I'm using an iPad Pro with a little plug-in microphone, which is a Zoom microphone. And if you've done any audio recording, this is standard audio recording equipment. They usually come in on top of the audio digital recorder, but it's quite a sophisticated microphone and just plugs into the lightning port. Main thing about in-field recording, which is what I try to do, because we're outdoors in the garden, but it's also really nice to have some ambient sort of sound, and just gives you more of a texture to the audio, as well as some challenges. I've got a windsock, which is called a dead cat in the industry, if you're not familiar with it, just to help cut back on the wind noise, which can be quite distractive audio recording. And I use quite basic sort of audio editing equipment. We've got a laptop, and I used to use Audacity, which is free, but I moved to Hindenburg, which is more of a audio journalism angled software. Unfortunately, that costs money, but we're lucky to have a bit of funding to contribute to that. And I do hosting on Anchor, which is again free, unlimited storage space, quite important if you just want to try out something that you don't want to commit yourself to. And I found it really quite a good host. There's more sophisticated hosting options there, but obviously you have to pay for them. And we've been lucky because the storytelling thing has been a thread through our whole project development. We were lucky to get some money, not only for the equipment, but also for my staff time, for me, myself, to produce the podcasts. And we might be running, because it's been mostly CCF funding, so we might be running out of that money. So we've been really lucky to have it. And I would love to explore any other ways of funding or running the podcast beyond the end of March. So if you have any ideas, they're all welcome. So it's not just equipment, and it's not just me. As I said, I like involving other people. And actually, you know, when you look at successful podcasts, and if you've been involved in a successful podcast, often it's really a team that is behind it. And I've poached some people. So I just wanted to give a shout out to this lovely person here, that person that's holding a microphone. It's Kathleen Gray, who's been my star blogger and award-winning volunteer in storytelling around climate. This is her award ceremony from Climate Challenge Fund. So she's basically started from, she's been an experienced storyteller. She loves writing, but she never really touched the technology or digital stuff before. And she started with aplomb doing the blogging, was featured in videos when we did videos with our gardener, and now she's moved into the podcasting space and is doing amazing interviews with people, contributors to the podcast. So there's other volunteers that I'm involving, 1 or 2 stories, mostly to do the interviewing. But I've had good luck of having a friend who's an audio producer who initially helped with a lot of audio editing for the podcast, and that's often quite a useful person to have in the team. Unfortunately, he thought this was a really interesting occupation. Now he's set up a business doing podcast editing for people. So I've lost him as a volunteer force. He's not as available, but I'm really glad to see this is a space he was able to move into. So it's nice to have a team. I like hearing people's voices, but it's also practically really important to have that help to develop your stories and your podcast. So what do we actually produce, you ask? I'm not going to bother you with actually listening to one, because I don't think we've got enough time. Can everybody see the website for the podcast now? Is that still? Yeah, great. Because I wasn't sure how that's going to work with the screen share. So as I said, we are hosted on Anchor, and we have a monthly episode, around monthly, of 30 to 40 minutes. And what we do, it's mostly interview based, but often it's combining multiple interviews with people from different, with different aspects of the story. I like doing little vox pops from the community as well, which sort of adds a bit of texture to the story and provides the community voices in a lot of these stories, especially things like, we've got a new community fridge in the town, which, gave me an opportunity to have little interviews with people as they're, coming out of the fridge, and to see what they're thinking about the project. So it's about our project, about people that work with ideas to do with engaging people in climate change locally, general gardening, nature. We had really nice things like Nature Under Lockdown series. So lots of stuff. Have a listen if you feel like that's something useful. So that's the podcast. But, you know, I'm a novelty-seeking creature. So I went on a holiday a couple of years ago now to Switzerland. You might recognize the lovely snow. It was very disturbingly hot. So, you know, I kept thinking about climate change throughout the whole thing. So that wasn't particularly helpful. But as a good little tourist, I immediately, when we got there, I started looking for guided tours and audio tours of the place. I love exploring museums and spaces like that. And I found this little gem, which is My Climate Audio Adventure series. And it turns out there's a whole lot of these little audio tours available for multiple places in Switzerland. And it's all about local projects related to climate action. Lots of little things like tool shares and things like, you know, active transport. And the way it works, you basically download the tour onto your phone. You walk around to all these points on the map. And as soon as you hit the point, audio tour starts playing so you can hear the story of the place you're looking at. So I thought that was a fabulous idea. I enjoyed exploring these tours, which, you know, it's always about climate change, so it was quite topical for me. But I also looked at the Easy Travel app, which is the storytelling platform that this project used. And it turns out that Easy Travel app is free to use, so anybody can actually put together a walking tour or an audio tour if they want to, and that it's relatively easy to use. So what did I do? I immediately started experimenting with using that for audio tours to showcase what we're doing in Tayport around climate change. So I've sort of harnessed the podcast content and repurposed it into taking care of Tayport audio tour, and started experimenting with sort of other ways of using the app as well. So this is my new adventure, and I think it's a very interesting way of linking, you know, any climate work or climate thinking to the spaces it's happening in. And it would be a very interesting way to showcase maybe community projects across Scotland. So I've got this vision that maybe we will all put together a little audio tour for our projects around our communities at some point. But yeah, so this is where I'm at the moment.